The phone jolted me awake from my trance, buzzing relentlessly in my pocket. I wiped the sweat from my forehead and stepped outside the ramshackle clinic, where the midday sun stretched long shadows across the dusty rural village. My stomach twisted when I saw the name flashing on the screen, Greg. After years of navigating my stepfather's chaos, I knew his calls rarely spelled good news. Still, curiosity, and maybe a flicker of foolish hope, pushed me to answer. "Hey," I said, keeping my tone flat. "Sophie, good to hear your voice." Greg chirped, way too chipper for my liking. "Just thought you'd want the heads up. I sold the mountain cabin." I froze, my grip tightening on the phone. "You what?" "Sold it," he repeated, as if it were no big deal. "Don't sound so shocked, kid. It's for the greater good, mine obviously." His smug chuckle set my blood on fire. "I'm Sophie, and as far back as I can remember, Greg's been the splinter under my nail. My mom tied the knot with him when I was 15, and he slithered into our lives with a grin and a handshake. But beneath that slick facade? A guy who'd sell his soul, or my cabin for a quick buck. That cabin wasn't just some weekend getaway. It was my refuge, a haven I poured years of sweat and love into, tucked away in the mountains. It's where I'd recharge after soul-draining work trips, host friends for lazy weekends, and feel the world melt away. Hearing Greg treat it like a bargaining chip in his endless hustles? That hit me like a punch to the gut. "You had no right," I snapped, my voice trembling. "That cabin wasn't yours to sell." "Relax," he drawled, oozing arrogance. "I've been holding down the fort while you're off playing hero. Besides, what's the point of clinging to something you barely use? It was an easy fix for my debts. You'll thank me later." "I'll thank you when pigs fly," I shot back, slamming the call shut before he could spew more nonsense. I paced outside, fury and disbelief churning inside me. Greg's nerve was limitless, but this was a new low. What he didn't know, and what I wasn't about to tell him yet, was that the cabin wasn't fully his to pawn off. My best friend Mia co-owned it with me. Years ago. We'd locked it down with a legal agreement. No sale without both our signatures. This fight was far from over. I dropped onto the edge of my cot, staring at the phone like it might explode. Greg's smug voice looped in my head, taunting me. How could he think this was okay, selling something so personal like it was a garage sale trinket? That cabin wasn't just a building. It was my lifeline. As a kid, I'd spent summers there with Mom, chasing fireflies and hiking trails before Greg crashed into our lives. After she passed, it became my rock. The one steady thing in a world that kept crumbling. To Greg, though, just another asset to bleed dry. I tapped Mia's name in my contacts and held my breath as it rang. "Hey, Soph. What's up?" She answered, her voice bright. "Greg sold the cabin," I blurted, unable to mask the rage. A long silence stretched out. "He what?" "Says he needed cash to settle some gambling debts," I said. Venom dripping from every word. "Thinks he can do whatever he wants, but our agreement stops him cold. He can't sell without your okay." Mia let out a low whistle. "That man's got no shame." "None." "Tell me about it," I said. "I need your help to fix this. I'll wrap up my volunteer gig here and head home ASAP. Can you dig up the legal docs meanwhile? I want to hit back hard." "Done," Mia said, her tone steely. "We'll handle this together." Hanging up, a strange calm washed over me. Greg thought he'd outfoxed me, that I was too far away to fight. He had no clue who he was messing with. I wasn't that timid teen he used to bulldoze. I had allies, resources, and the law on my side. If he thought this was checkmate, he was in for a nasty surprise. The next few days blurred by as I powered through my volunteer work, shoving my emotions into a tight box. But no matter how busy I stayed, Greg's betrayal gnawed at me. I couldn't shake the image of him gloating, debts wiped clean at my expense. One night, I grabbed my journal, a travel must-have, and let the words spill out. Writing always untangled my mess of feelings, and I needed clarity now more than ever. Memories flooded back, my first trip to the cabin with Mom, fixing it up with Mia. Quiet nights by the fire when time seemed to pause. This wasn't just a place, it was part of me. And Greg thought he could trade it like a poker chip? Not on my watch. Mia called the next day. "All business. Check the agreement," she said. "You're spot on, he had no right to sell without me." The sales bunk. Relief hit me like a wave, but anger surged right behind it. "Do we know who he sold it to?" "Not yet," she said. "County records show no ownership change. Sounds like he tried a shady backroom deal." "Classic Greg," I muttered. Always cutting corners. So next move, she asked. We can confront him head on, I said, or let the law crush him. Either way, he's got nothing to stand on. Let's do this right, Mia said. I'll back you up. Thanks, I said, exhaling a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I'd be lost without you. You'd survive, she teased. But I've got your back. A plan crystallized as I hung up. I'd finish here, head home and face Greg. Not with shouts or tears like he'd expect, but with cold, calculated precision. He'd always underestimated me. Time to flip the script. When I finally got home, the silence hit me hard. The cabin always greeted me with peace, but now it felt eerie. My plants drooped, mail spilled across the floor, and the fridge echoed with emptiness. I dropped my bags inside, the weight of the fight ahead sinking in. Then my phone buzzed, Greg again. I almost ignored it, but something snapped. Time to end this. Well, the world traveler returns, he said, his voice oozing fake warmth. Back to reality, huh? What do you want, Greg? I cut in, no patience left. Just checking in. He said, smug as ever. Don't be too sore about the cabin. It's gone spilled milk, you know? My jaw locked. Funny you say that, I replied, voice steady. Because it's not gone. Mia and I checked the records. You can't sell what's not yours alone. It's still ours. A beat of silence, sweet proof I'd rattled him. That's absurd, he snapped, his tone tightening. The buyer paid cash. It's done. Nope, I said. Mia's my co-owner. No consent, no sale. Legally, you're screwed. His laugh came out brittle. Think you're so clever, huh? Always the perfect little girl trying to run the show. You don't get how tough it's been for me, Sophie. I did what I had to. You stole from me, I fired back. And I'm supposed to pity you? Live with your choices, Greg. He hung up and I stood there, trembling with rage and triumph. For years I'd let him twist me up with guilt and lies. Not anymore. This wasn't just about the cabin, it was about taking back my voice. Next morning I pored over the docs Mia sent. The co-ownership agreement was airtight. No sale without both signatures. Greg's move wasn't just shady, it was illegal. A sharp knock broke my focus. I opened the door to find him standing there, smirking like he owned the place. Mind if I come in? He asked. Barging past before I could answer. I crossed my arms as he plopped into a chair. What do you want now? I asked. Look, Sophie, he started, dripping condescension, I get you're mad. But hear me out. I was in deep. Those guys I owed weren't playing nice. I had no choice. So you thought stealing my cabin was the answer? I raised an eyebrow. Borrowing, he corrected. Like it softened the blow. I'd have paid you back once my luck turned. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Your luck? That's your plan? You've been chasing bad bets since I met you. Why would now be different? He squirmed, then rallied. You're blowing this out of proportion. It's just a cabin, you're barely there. Let someone else enjoy it. It's mine, I snapped. My home. You don't decide what matters to me. Mia feels the same, and your sail's dead in the water. His face darkened, a flicker of panic in his eyes. You wouldn't turn me in, would you? Ruin your own stepdad. I leaned in, locking eyes. Try me. For once he had no comeback. He muttered something and stormed out, slamming the door. I sank into a chair, adrenaline pumping, shaken, but alive with a spark of victory. Greg was finally seeing his old tricks wouldn't fly. I called Mia right after. He showed up, I said, pacing. Tried to guilt me with some sob story about borrowing the cabin for his debts. She snorted. Borrowing? He's delusional. What did you say? Told him the sale's void and I'd go to the cops if he pushed it, I said. Rattled him, but he'll probably try something else. Let him, Mia said. We've got the law locked down. I've got a lawyer drafting a cease and desist. If he messes with the buyer again, we'll bury him in paperwork. I nodded, her confidence steadying me. Thanks, Mia. I owe you. You do the same. She said. We're a team. Over the next few days, I gathered ammo, screenshots of Greg's texts, the co-ownership agreement, even tracked down the real estate agent he'd roped in. When I called her, she sounded nervous. I didn't know the full story, she said. Greg swore he had the green light. If I'd known there was a co-owner, I'd have walked away. Well, you know now, I said, keeping it cool. I need your help. Can you confirm he signed a loan? Yeah, she admitted. The buyer hasn't paid up. I flagged it as fishy. I'll send you the docs if you want. Please do, I said, scribbling her details. Hanging up, I felt a surge of resolve. Greg thought I'd roll over. Big mistake. That night, Mia called. Letter's ready, she said. Sending it tomorrow. If he tries anything, we escalate. Perfect, I said, a grin sneaking out. For the first time in weeks, I was steering the ship. The cease and desist hit Greg the next morning. Crisp, brutal, no wiggle room. Any more moves and we'd sue. I pictured his face. Red, indignant, maybe a little scared. He'd spent years bending people to his will, but this wall wouldn't budge. Later, the agent emailed me the proof. Greg's loan signature on a sham deal. My stomach churned, but my resolve hardened. He'd gone too far. Then came the call from Detective Carter. A local cop Mia had looped in. Miss Harper, he said, all business. I've reviewed your docs. The sale's unauthorized. We can investigate if you want. Yes, I said, no hesitation. Let's move. We'll contact the buyer and explain, he said. If Greg keeps at it, we'll push for fraud charges. Thank you, I said, hanging up with a rush of anticipation. The tide was turning. Next day, Greg called, voice thick with rage, and a hint of desperation. What the hell, Sophie? You're torching everything. No, I said, calm as ice. I'm guarding what's mine. You lit the match. Ungrateful brat, he spat. I stepped up when your mom couldn't cope, and this is my thanks? I laughed, cold and sharp. You didn't step up. You took over, lied, schemed, used us. Now you're reaping it. He tried to argue, but I shut it down. Talk to my lawyer if you've got more. Click. I leaned back, heart racing but steady. Greg's reign was crumbling. 2 days later, Carter updated me. Buyer's out. They didn't know about the co-owner. Sale's dead. Cabin's yours. Relief crashed over me. So it's safe. Yep, he said. But we're keeping the case open on Greg's fraud. Want to press charges? Yes, I said, firm. He needs to answer for this. Done, Carter said. You've got grit, Miss Harper. After. Called Mia. Sale's void, I said. Cabin's ours. Buyer's out and Greg's facing the music. Hell yeah, she cheered. He's done. Police are on it, I said. Fraud charges incoming. About time, she said. Proud of you, sophomore. That night I drove to the cabin. Stepping inside, the woodsy smell and creaky floors flooded me with memories. I sat by the fire, letting the mountain quiet wrap around me. This was my sanctuary, and it was still mine. Greg hadn't won. A week later, Carter called. Greg's charged of fraud and attempted theft. Court's next. Case is solid. Relief, vindication, a pang of sorrow, emotion swirled. Thanks, detective. For everything. You stood tall, he said. Not easy with family, but you did it. Next day, Mia and I met at the cabin with wine and a sunset view. To us, she toasted. And telling jerks where to shove it. I laughed, clinking glasses. To us. This fight taught me more than I'd expected. I'd spent years dodging conflict, keeping peace with Greg at my own expense. Now I knew my strength. The cabin wasn't just a place, it was my proof I could stand firm. Weeks later, life found a new groove. The cabin became my haven again, each creak a reminder of what I'd saved. Greg faded to silence after the charges. Mom called once, timid. You know how he is, Sophie, she murmured. I do, I said. That's why I fought. She sighed, no guilt trip this time. I hope you're at peace. I am, I said, meaning it. Mia and I spruced up the cabin, new paint, roof fixes, wildflowers by the path. Each task reclaimed more than wood and nails, it reclaimed me. One night, Mia asked, what's next, Soph? You've won this round. I grinned. Keep doing what I love, volunteering, traveling, living my way. No one's calling the shots but me. She raised her glass. To that. Standing on the porch one evening, pine air sharp in my lungs, I felt truly home. Not just in the cabin but in myself. Greg's chaos had tested me, but it showed me who I could be. And that was worth every fight.